Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Into Deep podcast. Very excited today to introduce to you my guest, Mrs. Rachel Pfeiffer. Actually had the pleasure of having Rachel's lovely husband on the show very recently, who had nothing but amazing things to say about you, obviously.
I hope so.
Of course, yeah. Relationship psychotherapists, you'd think they'd have good things to say about each other, right? So he was amazing, and I'm really looking forward to chatting to Rachel. She is a psychotherapist, yoga teacher, breathwork facilitator, about 2 decades experience, and basically she helps clients become more connected to their bodies, their minds, their emotions, and helps them to live more fulfilled and intentional lives. Does that sound about right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Okay, let's do this. I start off by asking my guests the same questions. I want to know, who is Rachel Pfeiffer?
Well, as you described, I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm a breath worker. And I think those 3 areas of my life really do feel like the fullest expression and the fullest manifestation of who I am. I'm always mindful not to identify too much with my work, but I do find that my work really does feel like it encapsulates all the parts of who I am. So it's such a pleasure to be able to bring this work into the world and to dive into it, not just with clients, but for myself.
Okay, that's amazing. That sounds like what you're doing sounds like your life's purpose, which you seem to be very aligned with. How did you land to where you are today? You know, I was reading a little bit about you, and I know you stepped into a therapist room when you were age 11. So is that where it all began for you?
Yeah.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about that experience.
Yeah. I feel particularly blessed that I've always had a lot of clarity that this is the work that I want to be doing. My mum, in her infinite wisdom, when my parents separated, she took me and all my siblings to see a therapist just to make sure that we were adjusting well with the divorce. And I remember walking into this strange woman's room and having these conversations that just made me feel this energy in my body. And I didn't have the word for it. In hindsight, I'd probably call it empowerment. But I remember she taught me a certain way to interact with my brother, who I was always just obsessed with. And this method was going to give me more access to him. Pretty much, I was the annoying little sister, and I just wanted to hang out with my brother.
Like every younger sib, right? Like that's just what it's like.
100%. Yeah, I was just so annoying. I wanted his attention. And I remember she got this whiteboard out and she explained to me like the idea of the push-pull dynamic, that the more that you come to him and you get up in his space, the more he needs to pull away and create space. And that if I want to be closer to him, I actually need to create a little bit of space between us to allow him to come to me. Anyway, at 11, this was revolutionary because I was like, oh my gosh, I can change my behavior to get what I want. This feels really powerful. And I almost became addicted to that experience, that feeling of awareness and that feeling of, oh, I actually can have agency in my life and I can have control over my life. And I just remember thinking, whoever she is, whoever that witchy woman is that's making me feel this this amazing feeling, that's what I want to do. And I never veered from that. I went on to study psychology, went on to study philosophy as well. And I think knowing what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be in this world from such a young age and having her guidance, you know, to this day, you know, I still see her now, I've been able to use everything in my life to get to this point. Not just the academic training, which I have loved and continue to do, but also just my life experiences. I think everything in my life has been geared towards doing this work. So I feel, like I said, I feel particularly blessed that I've always had this sense of clarity, because I know a lot of people do struggle with, with clarity around what they want to do with their vocation. I mean, to be fair, I haven't had clarity in a lot of other areas of my life. It's just been one, but it's felt it's always felt like such a strong and clear conviction from such a young age.
Okay. I find that really amazing. And I just laugh to think of myself as an 11-year-old who was probably picking my nose and eating it. You were having these really emotional, game-changing, life-changing, life-shifting, paradigm-shifting experiences. So that's amazing. So what has happened between now and then to put you to where you are today? That 11-year-old girl who walks out of a therapist's office to what you're doing today with your business and with your life.
What's happened in the last 20 years?
Let's get the Reader's Digest version of that.
Strap in, guys. What has happened? I think knowing that I wanted to be a therapist was always my North Star. It was this area that I wanted to go towards in my life. And I think very early on I understood that being a therapist is not just about what you know or what you do. It's also about who you are. Because I've bounced to a lot of different therapists. I've experimented with a lot of different types of therapy before. And what I've found is the most therapeutic and healing part of the whole experience is the quality of my relationship and connection to the therapist. My capacity to feel their empathy, their compassion, their presence, and even just their nervous system. I remember someone described therapy as borrowing your therapist's nervous system for 60 minutes, that I can come in really dysregulated and my therapist is just sitting there in presence and this sense of groundedness that my nervous system gets to pick up on. And so I think I see everything that I've experienced, both the academic and the personal, as all kind of grist for the mill, all experiences that I've used to shape the way I do this practice. And so a big part of it would be I've just done 20 years of my own therapy or about that. That's definitely been one of the most transformative and influential aspects to what it is that I do. But then I also went and became a yogi when I was, 15. I think I stumbled into a yoga class and I was like, wow, they can do some crazy shit. I want to do that. And started with the asana practice, like the really physical body-based practice, and then just fell in love with all of the other parts of it. And then I went on to do my undergraduate. I studied philosophy, which I absolutely adored. It was just getting into a room with a bunch of unbelievably intelligent people and arguing for hours and hours on end, which as a younger sister, I'm very good at. And then I went and studied psychology and then did my master's in psychotherapy and counseling, and then additional training on top of that just to get more and more specialized. And then last year I did my breathwork training, which really just felt like putting it all together. Yeah. I think the breathwork is such a body-based, experiential, almost therapeutic modality that helped me to take kind of 20 years of this intellectual understanding that I got in therapy and integrate it. And it made so much sense that I was able to bring the body and the energetics of yoga into this incredibly powerful but sometimes overly intellectual practice of psychology and psychotherapy.
Yeah, I love that. We were just talking a little bit off camera about how, everything's integrated now. A lot of personal trainers like myself, there's a little bit more that they want to learn and develop, which is what I'm doing, doing the master of psychotherapy and counseling. Just because it's all integrated, right? It's all linked. I want to rewind a little bit. You mentioned how lucky you were to have a sort of North Star guiding you. You knew kind of what you wanted to do from what it sounds like a very young age. What about those people out there who don't have that clarity? Is there anything you could recommend to them to, find their North Star if they're struggling right now on knowing which direction they want to head in?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think my mum always used to say to me, follow the little voice, these little whisperings that can happen in the gut, these feelings of things feeling wrong or right or dissatisfying. And I think sometimes there can be this desire to hit the North Star, to have like this real sense of clarity and conviction. And this is where I know I'm going. But I think an equally powerful way to get there is to listen to the small moments along the way.
They call them glimmers. I mean, are you hearing this? Like, I think
Yeah.
someone dubbed the term glimmer.
Yeah.
I can't remember who it was, but yeah, these little glimmers of
Yeah.
glimpses of things that are lighting you up or pulling you in a certain direction. Right?
Yeah. Things that just feel activating. And I think if you're unsure of where to go, start with something. Doesn't matter what it is, but start with something. I would often say, like, let your curiosity pick that something that doesn't necessarily make sense, but for some reason it excites you, it energizes you, or you're just curious about it. You just want to know more about it. Take that first step and then see how it feels. And I think that's a body-based practice. If I start a job and I find that I just, come Sunday, I dread going to work, or I just can't stop hitting snooze, or I'm calling in sick all the time, that's probably your body's way of saying that this isn't the job for you. It's not creating this life force or this energy, this excitement. But alternatively, if you feel yourself kind of excited to go to work and you find it a little bit difficult to log off because you're really like stuck into this project and it's feeling good, or you're excited to climb the ladder or get to know people or expand your opportunities, then that's probably your body's way of saying that you're onto something. And I think it's a continuous trial and error, that I go and try something and it says, yes, kind of this, but not exactly. Take another step, to the left. You take that step forward into the left, and then you sense how that feels. But I think just taking action and letting your body give you the feedback is a really great way of starting to get towards that North Star. And a very honest way as well, because I think sometimes when we don't know what we want to do, we get up into our head and we try and figure out the perfect 10-step plan. But I can't tell you how many people I know who have created the 10-step plan, nailed it, got to the end, and they're miserable because it wasn't authentic. It wasn't this body-based decision. It was this idea of what they thought they should do that's just completely out of alignment with what really feels good to them.
Yeah, I love that. And that really resonates with me as someone who out of high school didn't really know what I was doing. I ended up going to study a business degree, had no interest in business. All my friends were doing it. Ended up working a year in an advertising agency and I fucking hated it. My body was doing some weird things. Like looking back on it now, I developed this problem. Like I sweat a fair bit, but like when I go into the office, I would like be drenched in sweat, like in the middle of winter. And I thought I had like a full-on sweat problem, seeing doctors, this and that. And when I quit a year later, it just stopped. Yeah. My body telling me to get the fuck out of this. Like I knew I absolutely hated it.
Yeah, the body will speak. I had the same thing. I remember I went to a job and it was just a corporate job that I was doing while I was studying. And I was so tired all the time. And I went to the doctors. I was like, all right, let's look at my iron levels. Let's make sure I'm working out enough. Let's, all the things were fine. I was sleeping enough. I was eating well. I was just really not engaged with the work. My body was just bored when I was there. And I think sitting as so much as well, my whole body just like shut down and rejected this job. And as soon as I moved jobs, I was like, oh, wow, I have all of these like reserves of energy that I didn't know were there.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we're going to find out a little bit more about the Embodied Mind Collective. Sure. So what was your inspiration for starting that and how do you guys differ from other practices?
Well, the Embodied Mind Collective, it's the practice that I run with my husband, Bevan. We wanted to create a space where we could integrate all of the teachings that we've come to understand and experience ourselves through yoga, but also all of the teachings that we've gained through our study of psychotherapy. Because like I said, I don't think that you can holistically embody the psychotherapeutic work if you are ignoring the body, if you are ignoring the energetics. And so this is our space, this is our offering where we get to bring the two together and walk people through them.
Okay. Love that. So tell me, you guys focus on relationships there, right? That's one of your major focuses.
Yeah, Bev does.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you see, what are your clients mainly? Or is it a big mix? Like who do you tend to attract?
Yeah, so I work quite a bit with people who have already done a relative amount of therapy. Maybe they've done CBT with a clinical psych. but they're ready to start to take the cognitive understanding and take it into like this embodied experience to better understand their body, their nervous system, and their emotions. So that's mostly who I see in terms of demographic, males, females, all ages.
Okay, great. And so you mentioned when I said, is there anything particular you wanted to talk about? You were like the body and emotions. So tell me a little bit more. What do you love so much? What fascinates you about the body and our emotions?
I think it's the missing piece in the West. And that has been my experience because, like I said, I remember I've been in therapy for ages. And when I was at ACAP and I was doing my master's, one of the teachers was doing this, I guess, an experiment, like a fishbowl experiment. I'm not sure if you guys still do them.
We did a few of those,
where a student gets to volunteer and throw themselves to the wolves and essentially they do a live counseling session. And the teacher was a Gestalt therapist, so she was working a lot in the here and now. And she asked, does anyone want to come up and be a participant for this? And I had just been through this experience where my ex-partner had been cheating and we'd broken up, and it was a really crazy story. And I'd been to therapy and I'd talked about it, and I feel like I'd really made sense of it. It felt complete, felt whole. And so I put my hand up and I was like, yeah, like I'm going to entertain the people with this very funny story of how I got cheated on. And I walked in very confidently and I'm telling this story about how I discovered this thing and how it's actually really funny and how I put the pieces all together. And I remember telling this story and I wasn't getting the reaction from her that I thought I would. I thought I would get gasps and a lot of engagement. And she just very quietly leaned in and said, as you talk about this story, you're not breathing. And I was like, oh, no, what do you mean? She's like, your chest is very red and your breath is very shallow. And I was like, oh, well, okay, yeah, and she's like, what does your body have to say about this? And I remember I just took a moment where I pulled my awareness down and there was just so much sensation in my body. She was right. I hadn't taken a full, long breath in 10 minutes. And my chest was so tight and my face was so red and I was almost shaking with this energy. And I burst into tears, like just violent, uncontrollable sobbing. And I remember I was just like, I had my head down and I was like, what do I do? And she's like, cry. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's 30, 40 people around me just watching me sob. And I think she picked up, she's like, okay, this probably feels like too much. You don't have to do it all here. But what I'm seeing is that there's a bit of a disconnection between the story that you're telling with your mouth and your brain and the story that your body is telling. And that was a game-changing moment to me because it made me realize that whilst I had all of this cerebral understanding and I had, I could tell you the top 10 reasons why he was unfaithful and what was his part and what was my part and his attachment style. I could deliver that to you in a really beautiful intellectual box, but I was so disconnected to my body and I was still carrying the remnants and the as Bessel van der Kolk will say, my body was keeping the score of what had actually happened. And so that gave me such an appreciation for the way that sometimes we over-intellectualize our experience and we organize it and we make it pretty and neat and accessible up in our brain, but our body still feels really overwhelmed and really disconnected from what's happening. And so my work was then to go and, go from the neck down and build a relationship and learn the terrain of my body. And that to me, once I was able to bring in the body piece, that's when I really started to feel that deep sense of alignment and clarity and confidence and all of those things I felt I was working so hard to achieve from therapy previously.
Okay. That's amazing. And another resonating moment for me, I had some severe anxiety issues in my early 20s. I had a panic attack, really bad one, thought I was going to die. I don't know if I've had one that bad before. And then since then I became very anxious, thinking that it was going to happen again. Didn't like driving in traffic, didn't like being in lifts, crowds, all that sort of stuff was very triggering. And the first psychologist I ever saw, another one of the reasons why I want to become a psychotherapist is just because these life-changing moments I've had in therapist office. And went in there. She tried to get me to do some mindfulness stuff. I'm like, this is meditation. This is a wank. This isn't going to work. In my early 20s, felt great after. And then she just goes, I don't want you to go home and I want you to write down what's going on in your body when you're feeling anxious. I went home, started feeling anxious for whatever reason. And like you, I just didn't even realize it, but I would always stop breathing. And then literally just learning that one cue, one session in a therapist's office, I was basically essentially cured of my anxiety.
Wow.
Yeah. So talk to me. So you talk about this traumatic incident, this traumatic breakup of yours. Intellectually, you were telling yourself, I'm all good. This is funny. Let's have a laugh. But your body was saying something different. How did you learn to heal your body?
Slowly would be the first part. It was about having a connection with my body before I was able to then use that connection to heal. So what I mean by that is, I think we all come into this world with a connection to our body. We all have this sense of authenticity, of being in our body. And what I mean by that is, when I feel hungry, when I feel sad, especially as a child, especially as a baby and a toddler, the way that I feel in my body, I express out into the world. There's not many self-suppressing, like 6-month-old babies who say, I'm really hungry, but I don't want to disturb mum and dad. So I'll just keep this one to myself. It's whatever I'm feeling is my authentic expression. And so I think we all come into this world connected to our body, but then something happens that disconnects us from this natural state of being. And so I had to go and learn how to be in my body again. And very practically, that meant how to bring my awareness to the sensation in my body. And it would start with things as small as, can I feel my foot on the floor right now? And can I feel the texture of the rug underneath the sole of my foot? And can I feel my pants wrap around my waist? Okay, can I go a little deeper, a little further inside? Can I start to feel the tension in my chest, or the tightness of my stomach, or the way that my body feels when I'm not taking that breath? And once I was able to learn to sense those sensations, I think the other part was to understand that whilst they might be uncomfortable, they're safe. Because I think that that's where we start to go wrong. We feel this discomfort and we assume that it's wrong, so we avoid it. And I think that's a really natural human tendency. I think humans have this natural proclivity to move towards pleasure and away from pain. Right? It's why we like warm, hot showers and we don't like putting our hands on hot stoves, right? So when we feel discomfort in our body, it's very natural that we say, well, I don't want to feel that. Let me avoid that. Let me make myself busy. Let me pick up my phone and scroll. And so the work for me was to learn that even though I'm feeling this uncomfortable sensation, A, it's safe. B, it will pass. And C, my ability to stay with it with presence and compassion actually moves it quicker and can bring with it this level of insight and wisdom. But I think that's a very physical practice. And this is why I think people who have a body-based practice like yourself, intuitively they kind of get it. Like, you understand that if you want to lift weights and put on size, there is quite literally a physical pain that's associated with that. Or if you're going to foam roll something out, there is a high level of sensation that you just have to sit with and tolerate and, in a way, work with. Because you know that, okay, whilst my bicep is burning here, that's actually feedback. That's feedback that I'm doing the right thing, or maybe I need to move change the activity or the exercise in order to target the part of the body that I really want to get into. But I'm able to actually have this dialogue and this interaction with this sensation in my body. And actually now when I'm feeling the burn, this is a great thing, because I know that it means that muscle is being torn apart and rebuilt to be made bigger. So I think learning to be with sensation in your body, I mean, that was my biggest thing. And then learning to have this compassionate, curious conversation with what's arising in my body allowed me to go back in with that old story and be like, okay, what was the truth? How did you actually feel?
That's very interesting. And I think of the old adage of no pain, no gain when it comes to, it's a very physical thing, working hard in the gym, doing hill sprints, sweating, working hard. But I guess you can also integrate that to the more mental side as well. And yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people, no one wants to feel pain. Right? And even as a young man, some of the most trouble I've ever gotten into in like being in shitty relationships, in shitty work situations is just there's a negative emotion coming up of, oh, maybe you're not in the right place, maybe this relationship isn't great, and just suppressing it, putting it away, and just like trying to trudge on and stay positive about that. Okay, so we're going to pivot a little bit and talk a little bit more about Rachel as a person.
Sure.
Can you tell us about a moment that shaped who you are?
I would say walking into a yoga studio in December of 2020 changed my life because it was when I met my husband. I had just gone through another breakup, and it was just one of those breakups that just tears you apart and brings you to your knees. It wasn't an amicable, peaceful breakup. It tore apart so many aspects of my life. And in hindsight, I'm so grateful that it did. And it pulled me apart. And I remember feeling so broken that I was like, okay, something in me is telling me to just get back to yoga because I hadn't really been practicing for a while. Just get back to your mat, and that's the space where you're going to heal. And so I remember I just moved and I signed up to a new yoga studio. And as soon as I walked in, I was like, damn it, like I'm supposed to be healing and my yoga teacher is really hot. I was like, Rachel, focus. Anyway, things progressed from there, and I met my husband, and I think that relationship and just his presence has been a game changer for me. I know you know him and you got to talk to him last week, but he just has this steadiness that is so inviting and so healing without having to say anything. I often say he has oak tree energy, where he's just so grounded and so steady, and you're just so safe to sit underneath the tree and be held. And I think having that kind of love in my life has been so transformative in all areas. I think it's just really helped me to regulate my own nervous system, which then gives me the capacity to do the work that I like to do.
That's beautiful and amazing. And we're returning the favor here because he was saying some beautiful and amazing things about you when we spoke as well. So that's nice. Tell me about, you've gone through some pretty tough relationships, it sounds like. What would your advice be to anyone listening who is sort of in the thick of it, maybe in a shitty relationship and they're struggling right now?
I would say understand your part in these relationships, because I think it can be really easy to become a psychologist and start to analyze all of your partners or your ex-partner's flaws and label their behavior or explain things away given their history. And I think that can be an interesting endeavor, but I think if you are in a relationship that feels unsatisfying, there is a role that you're playing, whether it's who you're attracted to and what you allow in your life, or if it is that you're bringing a certain dynamic into this relationship that is co-creating the dance or the climate between the two of you. And so I think that's where the practice of self-inquiry and self-awareness becomes really powerful in your relationships. I think also understanding that when we're in relationships, often what we're attracted to is not what is good for us, but what is familiar. And so for me, I kept finding that I was dating the same person, but just in a different body. It was the same relationship. And again, going to therapy and understanding why I was attracted to all of these men. Like what was it about this dynamic that I clearly on some level desired? That was so liberating for me, because what often happens is we will find people that feel familiar, and we almost recruit them to play this role of some incompleted childhood wound, and we work to act it back out. And I think the truth about healing is not that you need to go back and finish this story differently. You know, I might date people who are absent because it felt like my dad was absent, and if I can get this guy to love me, then that means that I finally get to receive this male love I never got to have in childhood. I think when we understand that we don't need to rewrite that story, we actually get to create a whole new story. I think that then love can become really expansive. Some part of our life where we get to really consciously write and narrate the experience that we want, rather than just continuously going back and poking an old wound.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And so tell me, how did you get to that point? Was this through just years of therapy and inner work, from, you know, attracting these, say, emotionally unavailable men to finding this big, strong, beautiful oak tree like man like Bevan? Was that just, you know, years of therapy or?
No, absolutely not. I wish it was. I wish the first time my therapist said, there's a bit of a pattern here, I was like, wow, you're true. Like, oh, you're correct. Let me heed your wisdom. Absolutely not. That is not how it happened. I just had to get burnt over and over and over and over and over again. And I think it had to culminate into this like disastrous breakup that I went through at the end. I think it had to get that bad. Like for me, that was rock bottom relationally. Because like I said, it blew everything up, not just physically, you know, with my living situation and financially, but it even just blew apart my beliefs, where I said, okay, I really cannot do this anymore. Like this isn't just hurting me. This is, it feels like it's killing me. So something has to change. And so I think for me, it really had to reach the end of the road, and I was forced to do something differently. And I think that's the way that most humans work, that we can have this awareness that this thing that we're doing is not good for us. And the awareness is not enough to change. Like things usually need to get quite bad in order for us to be like, okay, like fair enough. This has got to change.
Yeah, well, they say the pain has to become pretty much almost unbearable for people to finally change, right? So
because I was getting something out of the relationship, you know, even if they weren't destructive, even if they weren't healthy, unconsciously there was some sense of satisfaction, because I was, like I said, I was completing this incomplete childhood story. And so there was a part of me that was really drawn and was actually really served by these relationships. But I had to get to a point where I'm like, actually, I'm done spending my time trying to rewrite that story. I'm just like, I'm putting the full stop on this is how that story ended. And it may not have been the way I wanted it to, but continuously trying to pick up this pen and rewrite it is not working. So let me try something different.
Okay, so becoming the author of your own story and just being like, I've had enough of this pattern, I guess hitting rock bottom in a way, and just, you know, choosing a different path.
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So tell me, is there anything you do, any daily rituals that you implement to help with your emotional and spiritual health?
Yeah, of course. I know this is going to sound so cliche, so bear with me. Mindfulness and presence. And I think we can spend so much time trying to make our life beautiful and exciting and connected and meaningful and all of these things that a lot of us desire. But I think unless we have the capacity to be present to that life once we create it, we're wasting our time. You know, how often do we work so hard to get to a point in our life, and then once we get there, we're already looking for the next thing? You know, it's kind of like the hedonic treadmill.
Hedonistic treadmill, yeah. Very familiar with that. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as we get the thing, we're like, great, for a moment it feels really good, and then I'm off to chase the next thing. And I think slowing down and starting to pay attention makes life so much richer. And it's even things like taking a wonder walk, where I'll go for a walk, and I live in a really beautiful part of Sydney with lots of greenery. And I'm not taking my headphones. I'm not listening to Huberman for 3 hours. I'm walking really slowly, if I can, barefoot, and I'm taking my time, just taking nature in, looking at all the different shades of green, watching the way that the sun is hitting certain leaves at angles, drinking up the sounds of the birds around me, and really attuning my body to the present moment. Because again, you can live in the most stunning area in Sydney, but if you're not paying attention to how beautiful it is, what's the point? So I think slowing down has been, it's made life much more pleasurable. Even things like slowing down to eat. Like every morning when I have my coffee, because my coffee is like my ritual, I don't just chug it down. I take a moment to hold it and feel the heat in my hands and to smell it before I drink it. And I always take this, one thing I always do is whatever word I want for the day or whatever feeling I want to experience, I like put it in my drink energetically. And then I take that first sip and I'm like receiving the energy of this thing. And it's just a kind of made up ritual, but it helps me to slow down and it helps me to be really intentional about the way that I'm moving through my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's very bad. And I think being a personal trainer, bringing that to the physical, like it's really simple, right? People are like, what do I do to be fit and healthy? It's like, eat mainly fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, drink mainly water, all that sort of stuff. It's like, it's almost like the personal training version of that.
Yeah.
So,
and it's hard as a therapist because the truth is so many of the answers that you're looking for, you probably already know. And I'm sure you experience this as a personal trainer. People are like, what's the secret? And you're like, no secret.
No, everyone wants to know what supplements to take
100%.
and this and that. Like, whatever. Yeah.
What pill, what injection can I take? And you're like, you probably already know, right? It's the same thing with therapy. What's going to help you with your anxiety? Things like breath work, slowing down, mindfulness, meditation, improving the quality of your relationships. Don't do a job you hate. All the kind of basic things. And I think that one of the issues is because they're so basic and because we all know them, they tend to fly over our heads. But again, I think there's a real power to them. Like I'm sure you've experienced this. I always knew the importance of the physical side and how important it is to eat food that fuels my body and get my steps in. I was like, yeah. Like I know. Like I had PE in year 9. Like this is not new. Surprise, surprise. When I started to actually implement that stuff, holy shit, I felt so much better. Yeah. So I think there's no secret.
Yeah.
And I think that can be really frustrating for people because there's no one
quick
magic.
fix.
There's no quick fix. Breathe. Yeah. Learn to breathe. Learn to have better relationships. Learn to communicate. Learn to become aware of your mind through meditation, which can be brutal. Like meditation is no fun, easy feat. It's not as easy as like popping a Valium. But I think doing these basic things in the same way that doing all these things for your health in the long run make life easier, I think it's the same with these
100%.
psychotherapy tools.
And even recently I've been feeling a little bit chaotic in the mind. I've sort of stopped meditating or not meditating as much. I was doing a daily gratitude journal and I kind of pulled back. I'm like, I'm too busy. I'm all good. Do I even need that? And I just, even this morning I sat and I just did all that again. And I was like, oh God, I'm back. Yep. I'm back. You know what I mean? And I was just like, it's just doing the work, getting the reps in.
And I like that phrase of doing the work. It is work, like psychological hygiene and keeping yourself functional is not effortless. It requires effort. It requires investment. But I think it's an investment that is like, it is so worthwhile and the return is outrageous.
Okay. Yeah. Love that. So tell me, how does Rachel deal with setbacks?
Setbacks. How do I deal with setbacks? I would love to sit here and be like, and pretend like I'm really positive and I just see it all as a challenge. Like, no, I definitely get really frustrated. I think it depends on what the setback is. My experience of dealing with hardship and understanding how to navigate it, I think at first I thought that if I want to be good at this stuff, whatever good means, then what that means is I need to alleviate any kind of negative reaction. And as I come to better understand this work, I don't think that that's the case. You know, it's just like when we're working with trauma, the work is never to get triggered again. That's not possible. The work is to be able to recover from the triggers quickly. And so I think when I deal with setback, there is the very human, non-therapist part of me that's like, fuck, like just like straight to frustration, straight to the old narrative. But I have learned to love that part of me. I'm not sure if you're super familiar with internal family systems as a modality.
Me and Bevins briefly spoke about this. I read the No Bad Parts book.
Amazing.
And I'm really fascinated. I'm keen to delve a little bit more, but apart from reading the book, expand a little bit more on that.
Sure. I'm very intimately familiar with who pops up when I have a setback. And she's a very young part of me. And she's filled with a lot of shame and she's filled with a lot of fear. And whenever there's a setback, she loves to like reach for the driver's seat and she's like, I'm going to control how we deal with this. And for a while, there's a lot of push-pull between me and her when I was like, no, we're okay. Like get back into the back seat. I'm going to take over. And there was probably quite a bit of tension between the two of us. And I think especially with breath work, I've got to sit with her a lot. And now when I see her, she's like this very young, scared child. And I see her not as an adversary to beat to the driver's wheel, but as a part of me that I can just love with so much tenderness. You know, there's a setback. She starts to tell this story and I just look at her and I go, oh my goodness, my love, you are so stressed. I get it. I get how big this feels for you. And I get how seriously you take your job. And I'm really grateful for how hard you work for me. But I got it. I can take us to where we need to be. You can rest in the back seat. And if you want, me, the adult, can take the driver's wheel. And I think that process has been really liberating because I'm not so scared of her anymore. So it's a very long and convoluted way of explaining how I deal with setback. There's the initial like that will happen, but I think I'm able to step back into the present adult version of myself, as Richard Schwartz says, you know, the self energy, the capital S self energy, the one that's grounded, the one that's calm, clear, curious, confident, all those kind of things. But it's work.
You know, I love that. And so it's about having the awareness of the part inside of you that is trying to protect you, right? Instead of beating it up and saying, why are you here again? Why are you anxious? Why are you doing this? It's being kind and understanding it's just kind of trying to help you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
And it's a subtle tonal shift because I think sometimes people think that if we're being compassionate with ourselves, we're being a bit self-indulgent, that we're kind of letting ourselves off the hook. And all of the research shows us that having a voice inside of you that is curious and compassionate rather than critical is actually a way quicker way to get where you want to be. I often say to my clients, you know, if you fall onto the floor and I'm so angry at you for falling on the floor that I kick you and I stomp on you, is that going to make it harder or easier for you to get back up? Because I assume you want to get back up. You know, beating ourselves up is not, it gives us the illusion of productivity. It makes us feel as though we are keeping ourselves accountable and moving ourselves closer to where we want to be. But it's actually a really great way to just make yourself feel really stuck and defeated. Yeah.
It's amazing. So can you tell me now, do you have any controversial opinions on the sort of mental, emotional, spiritual health space?
Do I have controversial opinions? Yes, absolutely. I think, well, I don't know how controversial it is. I think CBT is way overprescribed as a therapeutic modality in Australia. I think it is a form of treatment that has had a ton of funding and a ton of research done, and because there is a high level of efficacy.
Because it's funny because we just did one of our major assignments on this exact thing. And
Really?
obviously because it's easier to study. It's that simple. And so people are more happy to throw funding at it. So it's just one tool in the toolbox, right? So
and look, I don't want to shit on CBT. I've used it. I've done it myself. It is useful, but I don't think it is a
be all and end all.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, in my experience, have had really terrible experiences of psychotherapy because this modality has been pushed on them when it's clearly not working.
Yeah.
And I think for certain people, myself included, at times it felt like gaslighting. It felt like, or just challenge that thought. That's an irrational thought. And again, as someone who was very disconnected from my body, that really just fed like that idea that emotions are irrational. You cannot trust them. Rationality is king. And I think it was a game changer for me once again when I was able to understand that just because a thought is irrational doesn't mean we shouldn't spend some time sitting with it and understanding it. And I also actually, if I can correct myself, I don't think there is such things as an irrational thought. I think everything makes sense with enough context. So that would be my controversial thought. I would, or opinion. I think CBT tends to get overprescribed in Australia, and I think that's why practices like psychotherapy are really important to come through and support and fill in the gaps where CBT doesn't feel complete for people.
Yeah, of course. And it's funny because most people who I guess aren't clued into the space, CBT is their sort of first experience with it. So if you have had CBT therapy and you're not really vibing therapy, then maybe seek out a therapist who has, different practices that they use. Yeah. Okay. Next question, a little bit of a funny one, but I want to know if you could sit down and have a conversation with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be? And what are you drinking? Are you having a wine? Are you having a matcha tea? Tell me that.
Oh, I think it would be Elizabeth Gilbert, the writer of Eat, Pray, Love. In yoga, there is this concept of having a guru, and our guru is like this spiritual gateway. But there's also, in life we might have one guru, but along the way we also have these people that are what we call upana gurus, which are these people that pop into our life whilst we're walking the path that help us propel ourselves forward. And they're not always this like big Indian, spiritual teacher. Sometimes it's your neighbor that pisses you off. Sometimes that is your spiritual teacher. Or sometimes it's like very literally a teacher of yours, a school teacher, a university teacher. And to me, I think Elizabeth Gilbert and the way that she speaks and the way that she's been able to use her life experiences to understand these broader themes of human experience. She's just been such a guide for me, especially in some really dark times. What would we drink? I'm trying not to drink this year. That's kind of just happened organically. There's no real big reason. I think just I'm getting older and alcohol doesn't sit in my body as well as it did when I was 21. But I think I accidentally stopped drinking because I was just so busy. And then I was like, wow, I feel so much better when I don't do this. So we're probably not drinking any alcohol. I think we're probably having like a chamomile tea. Okay. Like a nice
and
hot.
Calming as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. So do I need to put Eat, Pray, Love on my reading list, do you think?
Look, I think it's someone's cup of tea, or some people's cup of tea. It might not be everyone's, but I think she's a brilliant writer. She talks about these really universal themes of using heartache to find the God of your understanding, which I absolutely love. So I would recommend you put it on the list.
I'll get it on there for you.
Yeah.
So now tell me, Rachel, if you could give some advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that advice be?
When I look at my 18-year-old self, she's a hot mess, as I think all 18-year-olds are. I would tell her that the messiness is just perfect. I remember my therapist said to me that if you really are called to do this work, if you are called to be a therapist, and if you are called to be of service in this realm, that your learning won't be just through books. That you'll have to go through as Ram Dass calls it, the curriculum of the soul, and that life will hand you certain experiences that you need to go through in order for you to wake up, in order for you to understand certain parts of yourself, to meet certain parts of yourself. And so I look at her and her messiness and her, her irresponsibility and her rawness, and I say, go and make all those mistakes. Go and live a very high risk life, because I think that's the time to do it. When you're young, go and make a ton of mistakes and go and try on new personalities and try on new parts of yourself and just experiment and just explore. Like, go and try work that you wouldn't necessarily think you would like. Date people you might not think you like. Go and meet and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, because it's going to expand you in the way that only messiness can. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I would say what you're doing, I know it feels messy and it feels chaotic, but it's actually perfect. It's giving you exactly what you need.
Okay. I love that. So encouragement to, go out there and make some mistakes, because that's what the lessons are.
Yeah, and not purposely.
Of course. Try your best not to make the mistakes, but there will be mistakes.
If it feels uncertain, that's perfectly okay.
Yeah. So lean into the uncertainty maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Rachel, I'm just mindful of time here, and we're sort of wrapping up our conversation today. I'm feeling much lighter after this conversation. I hope our guests are feeling a little bit more enlightened also. If people want to follow your journey and, see what you're up to, how can they do that?
Sure. Well, the easiest way to find me is Instagram. It's Rachel Pfeiffer on Instagram.
Like Michelle, we mentioned earlier.
Like Michelle. Got the next 50 years of saying that.
Yeah.
Just felt nice.
Well, my daughter's Hallie, and so everyone's like, hey, is that Haley? I'm like, Hallie, like Halle Berry. Thank you very much. So yeah, very similar situation.
But we just got married, so it's really novel for me to say. Give me 2 years, and I'm like, yes, like Michelle. Yeah. So we'll see. So yeah, Instagram's the best way to find me, Rachel Pfeiffer. Or you can just find me on the embodimindcollective.com.au.
Amazing. And you guys run retreats as well,
We do, yes. Oh my goodness, that is probably one of my favorite ways of doing this work. So we integrate all the yoga and the psychotherapy in workshops, as well as the breath work. We just came back from Sri Lanka, which was unbelievable.
I saw it on Instagram. It looked incredible. I didn't realize it was your retreat, and I was like, wherever you guys are, it looks incredible. So
Bev and I, every single morning, we would wake up and I would kind of like turn to him and I'm like, well, oh God, another day off to work. Like I just cannot believe that this is our job. It's just unreal.
And so tell the people, when's your next retreat?
So we have one in Mudgee. It's sold out. But we have one in June in Mudgee, and then we're still we're trying to take it all over the world. We've done a few in Bali, we've done one in Sri Lanka, so we're kind of sensing out where we want to go next. We're kind of thinking like maybe Thailand or Hawaii.
Unreal. Yeah, I'm gonna have to sign myself up for that one. So keep your eyes peeled, guys. Thank you so much for listening. As always, share this episode if you got something out of it. And Rachel, it was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Looking forward to our next conversation.
Cool.
See you soon. Bye.